Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. Today, I have a guest who is going to tackle a difficult topic that I think many of us confront at some point in our careers, whether we realize it or not. And my guest today, Hannah Tackett, this is a topic that she really specializes in these days. And reading all of her material, the thing that really stuck out to me are the 3 points that, at least from my perspective, I'll let her speak to everything, but she talks about nourishment, boundaries, and alignment. And for me, even without meeting my guests firstly or beforehand, that is something that really spoke to me as far as what I can expect to hear from Hannah and a whole lot more. She has herself down as a Serene, as a career coach, obviously going into a lot more with health, mental health, and her company is Serene Success. And here with me today is Hannah Tackett. Welcome to Mark My Words. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited to talk about burning out because I know that there's just so many people I've encountered who were on the path to burnout and just never even knew it.
Yeah, I am really interested because you say a lot of interesting things in all of your material that I read up on. And it's like when you're living your life and you're really working hard, like right now, I'm working a ton of hours and trying to juggle doing this show around working all that overtime and just if I took all this out and just said my job, I'd be like, whew, I don't, I actually, depending on the day, I'll be like today, I don't feel like I'm burning out. But there's some days where I'm like, oh man, I really feel like I'm burning out. But I'm hoping that as we progress, that maybe you can define that because maybe all those times that I and other people are feeling that way, it's not even necessarily true. So hopefully you can define that for us. But before we get into the nitty gritty of that, this podcast usually kind of focuses a little bit on the forks in the road. And you have an interesting fork in the road, and at face value, you would think, and this is just one person's perspective, I guess, but I guess at face value, it's like, well, you're working in software, and first of all, I should actually back out of that thought and just ask, how did you get into the software industry? Was this something that you had a passion for? Did you just kind of find yourself there?
Not really. So I don't want to say it was kind of an accident, but essentially I was studying a lot of art. And one of the courses I took, and this is back in the day, was multimedia design. And I surprised myself by learning I could code. And then started making websites for people, ended up in software design, ended up in enterprise software design, and essentially spent 16 plus years in tech.
Nice. And then you said that you study art, which I now see. Usually I tackle college. I don't know why I skipped
Mhm.
college here, but was art something that you were, I'm guessing it was something you either were really good at or had passion about? Did you grow up doing a lot of art? How did you find yourself in that major?
So it wasn't a major initially, it was what I did for fun. And my major was physical therapy. So I was aiming for that. And along the way, I realized I didn't want to do that. However, I was pretty darn close to having an art degree. And so I switched towards the end.
Oh wow. So you basically did you just come into college like, okay, I'm not really sure what I want to major in, so I really like art. I'm gonna try that. How did that happen?
No, I mean, I knew what I wanted to major in. I thought I wanted to go into either occupational therapy or physical therapy. And I took art classes because I liked art and they were available. So I minored in art for fun.
Mhm. Oh, nice. Yeah, I took an art class and I didn't really expect to like it that much, and it
Mhm.
was actually one of my favorite classes in college. So yeah, no, that's a really cool path to take, and yeah, no, that's awesome. So you basically from there you were you went into physical therapy, you found yourself in the software industry, and then at face value, that wouldn't, I think, seem like something you would burn out on. But I personally know that I've had like a techie kind of career, and it's real easy to rack up the hours and to really, especially if you're happy, really like working on your own. And I don't have any idea what your job might have been like, but it's real easy to just get hyper focused, and before you know it, you worked a 12-hour day, maybe more. Uh, it might not seem like something though face value that you might find yourself burning out on, but it sounds as if you did. Maybe you can tell the story on how that came about.
Sure. So working in tech, and I found myself unable to get out of bed. So I just kept going, kept going, kept going, and then I hit a wall. Could not get out of bed for months. And the reason that was so pivotal for me was at this point in time, like I had children, very young children. I had this career that I had, you know, put a lot of effort into building, and a marriage I cared about. There's a lot on the line. And so when I hit that wall, when I couldn't get out of bed, when I wasn't showing up for my life, I was terrified that everything that I'd fought so hard for was going to fall apart. And so I made recovering, ending burnout, recovering from burnout, and then making sure it never happened again my highest priority. And then, so when I made that shift, like my focus shift to that being my highest priority, that was kind of the beginning of the journey for me that has led me to where I am today.
Wow. So, how did you know? Uh, Basically, I guess what I'm trying to ask is how do you know or how did you learn in the long run or even in the short term that you were stressed or even burned out?
So I like to think of burnout. So it's not a medical diagnosis, it's more of a colloquialism. And the way it happens, I think of it in stages because burnout isn't a sudden crash. It's really a silent buildup of stress over time. And stress by itself, we all know, is not necessarily bad, right? You can have good stress. You could be trying something new and be nervous about it. That's good stress. You could be at the gym working out, getting a sore muscle. That is good stress because it's building something up. When stress is no longer good is when becomes destructive. And so chronic unmanaged stress is destructive to our bodies and to our minds and essentially to our lives. And it sneaks up on us I could break it down into like three phases. So there's the first one, which is like that stealthy stress. And that's when we're beginning to feel irritable. Maybe we're feeling anxious. Maybe we can't sleep at night. Maybe we're having some tummy troubles, headaches, a lot of self criticism. And then if we don't deal with the source of the stress and shift things in our life at that point, we can end up in the second stage of burnout, which is I like to call it emotional erosion. And this is when that increasing emotional exhaustion leads to cynicism, dread, detachment from work and personal life. So maybe you're feeling like the Sunday scaries, like when I was in this one company where the one I burnt out in, I started experiencing my Sunday scaries on Friday at 3 p.m. because I knew I had to come back on Monday. And so I just felt like my soul was dropping out of my body. The dread was so intense that I had to go back. And maybe people are fantasizing about quitting, or you just feel detached from your work, and that's that second phase. And if at this point, you don't make a shift, you don't address it, you don't invest in yourself, it can turn into that third stage, which is that performance paralysis. And for me, it looked like lying flat in bed, not being able to get up for a couple months. I've worked with women who ended up in ER. I've worked with women who still showed up for work, but they weren't working, right? They weren't able to produce like they used to be able to produce. They're spending hours working, getting very little done, and end up being put on performance reviews when historically their entire career they've been top performers. So, and the reason that that performance hit is so critical is because it starts to affect our confidence. And confidence is so important in life. So those are the ways I think about, the gradual buildup of burning out. And it's really ideal to address it before you get to the point where you can't get out of bed, or before the point where your body forces you to stop and consider how things are going.
So you specialize in helping women with burnout. What have you learned by working with women and helping them and listening to their stories?
Well, I've learned that burnout has different faces, right? So there was my burnout experience, but other people have different experiences. Like I just mentioned, the one who she was still showing up every day, she was still logging in. She's, not in bed, she's not in the hospital, but she wasn't performing. She dreaded work, dragged her feet, fantasized about quitting. Um, and it was a struggle, and it was taking a toll on her entire body. She'd been gaining weight for years. It was having a health impact on her. It was affecting her ability to be emotionally present for her children. So there was this spillover in her life of the emotional drain that she was experiencing because of her relationship with work.
So what do you think is the difference between people who are just they've run their course with a job and they're going through things similar to what you and your clients have gone through versus actual burnout where you're really emotionally just tapped out, just logging in but not there, having trouble getting like it's not even that you're in your car and you're counting the minutes. You're like you can't even get out of bed. Like what's the difference there from your perspective?
So the difference there, like I said, it's just the different ways that it expresses itself in people's lives. So maybe for one person, they're just kind of detached from their job, like you're saying, they're just over it. And another person, they're sick in bed. So it shows up differently for different people. It doesn't mean it's a different thing.
So what are some surprising signs and symptoms of burnout? Because so much stuff gets put in the media about, oh, five ways you know that you've burned out and blah blah blah. But what are some surprising signs, maybe things that don't get normally talked about?
So since burnout is essentially the accumulation of stress over time, anything that's a stress symptom that is carrying on for extended periods of time can eventually turn into that burnout. But I think that what people sometimes don't talk about is that resentment. So when you start resenting your boss, resenting you know, your business, your career, resenting the drive to work, when that resentment starts to happen, that's really a good red flag for things need to shift. You need to change how you're showing up and how you're relating to work. And I think what isn't talked about is not necessarily the symptoms of burnout, but some of the success traps that lead to burnout. So, and these are behaviors that can drive us to success, but can also, when out of balance or when rooted in fear, can drive us to burning out. And and I think that these are critical. So there's like the first one is people pleasing. So you're trying to keep your boss happy, your kids happy, your spouse happy, and your needs are inevitably at the bottom of the list. And the second trap is perfectionism. So maybe, you've got high standards, you're known for your great attention to detail, But when rooted in fear, when rooted in fear of not being worthy or maybe job loss or rejection, those impossibly high standards and that level of perfectionism can drive you to burnout. The third is helping others or like overextending. And by this, I mean, not just being helpful to someone else, but whenever you see someone who needs help or see a gap, you overextend yourself and you pick up problems and responsibilities that belong to others. And when that is done to an extreme, it can lead to burnout. And then my last two, one is, the overachieving, and that's I'm textbook one of those for, you have the endless to-do list, lots of check boxes that you're getting through every single day. And the minute you get one accomplishment, you've got another one lined up. So you don't give yourself that time to celebrate or acknowledge what you've already done because you're always on to the next thing. And then the last is I like to think of it as like being the nice girl, or essentially having a fear of saying no or just not saying no and taking ownership of your time. And that can lead to burnout as well. So those are, I think the success traps are what is often left out of the conversation around burning out.
You said a lot of really good stuff there because really when it comes down to it, and as much as some of us, I know I tend to be one of those people who I really try to think of others first in a lot of situations. And as you get older, I just from my own experience, it's like, okay, you learn to change and alter your perspective because there has to come a point where other people have to come second and you gotta think of yourself first. And I know I personally have had to learn that like just through life, just okay, I'm really just bogged down, I'm frustrated, I'm resenting this, that, or the other thing, and I'm not I may not really be conveying it too much, but I'm feeling it
Mm-hmm.
internally. And that's one of those things, like you said a lot of things there that I feel just a lot of it kind of comes back to you as far as like how you're taking care of yourself. And it's so crazy sometimes, even right now for me, I'm working so many hours and I'm trying to do this show and trying to do a lot of other things and just trying to make sure everybody's happy. But I've actually put this show on little hiatuses because as much as I love doing it, it's like there comes a point where you just gotta say something's gotta go and
Mm-hmm.
something, you gotta just sometimes just when you clock out of work for the day, just sit in front of the TV or maybe not even sit in front of anything and just
Mm-hmm.
be quiet. So I don't, I'm kind of just rambling here, but one question that I should ask you is how does being quiet and meditating and just unplugging, how does that factor into helping people to decrease burnout?
I think it's huge. So burnout has been on the rise. And I mean, my hypothesis, my theory of one of the reasons why is because we are all always on. We're always plugged in. We always have the phones available. Whereas, I grew up before, the phone and all of those things, like not the phone, but the iPhone. Um, and there was a lot of white space in life. There was a lot of time when you were waiting for something or you were in between meetings and there was nothing to do. So, you have a book or you have a journal, you have that white space just to process what has just happened in your life. And I think that that's missing now for most of us because the minute we're done with one thing, we have the ability to immediately jump into something else, whether it's scrolling on social media or checking our email or finding something to be reactive to. And so when we start losing that white space is when we are able to process and complete the stress cycle. So if you don't have any margin in your life, if you don't have any white space, if you don't have any pauses in between activities and your brain is always on and you're always looking at your phone, um, you're likely not completing the stress cycle. You're likely just pushing it down and distracting yourself. And so that is how that stress is piling up and building up and building up because we're not taking the time to breathe, the time to just exist. Um, And what's interesting is people sometimes feel like taking that time is a waste of time. But there's a couple things we can get into there. One, productivity, human productivity is not linear. So it's not a waste of time. And by that, I mean, if you're just always going, 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 you're not more productive. You become less productive. So it's really more like a tide, like an ebb and a flow. So, you lean in, you do a good push on something, and then you lean back out and catch your breath. So when we schedule, and as business owners, like it's really great because we have the ability to schedule our lives this way. But when you take that into consideration when you're working, like have a period where you push and then have a period where just as intentionally you lean back, you take your foot off the gas and you go at a more manageable speed and then just kind of ebb and flow it. And then the second thing is that white space, that time where you're bored. That's when all the connections happen in your brain. Like the best ideas happen when you're doing something on autopilot that doesn't require thought. So that whether that's walking, going for a long drive, taking a shower, those simple activities where you're not staring at a phone, engaged, reacting to someone's demands, those are the magical moments where you're going to have your best ideas, where you're going to realize that there's better ways of approaching things in life and suddenly become more effective and more efficient. And you don't have to be quite so busy.
And you make a very, I mean, lots of very good points there, but the concept for my podcast did not come to me while I was grinding through busy season at work. I know that. It came to me when I mean, I can't really pinpoint exactly, but I know that it didn't come during the work hours. It came off time, relaxing, just a lot of the concept for what I'm doing. It was all brainstorming on my own time. It was not done during work hours when I'm grinding it out. So, and to your point earlier about I accomplished one goal, I gotta have another. Let me just tell you, I don't have like whatever like the what do they call those boards that slip in my mind? Can you think of what I'm talking about? The
Like a
success
Kanban
board,
board.
like the success boards or
Oh, vision,
whatever.
like a vision board.
I think so. Yeah, just you put down like how you're going to like what you're gonna accomplish or whatever, or really let's just blow it all up. I don't sit down and like make goals or anything like that. And I'm not saying that that's the right way. You know, there's a lot of right ways to go about life, but I personally have found that I don't necessarily need to tick off like every single goal or always be going for something. To your point, I feel like there is a lot of value in pacing yourself, and it's okay to accomplish something, take a breath, then, maybe brainstorm for the next thing or things. I mean, always good to be organized and have a plan. I mean, you don't want to downplay any of that, but I guess everybody has their own way. But I see where you're coming from, just from my perspective. I'm probably a lot more laid back than you probably should be. I don't like to put too much pressure on myself, but just to at least my perspective, you can accomplish things without really beating yourself up, I guess.
I like that. Yes, the lack of like not beating yourself up and taking that grace is
Yeah.
huge. Yeah.
And even though you're not talking about this particular thing, I'm still going to ask, how do you deal with those who have imposter syndrome, or perhaps even that might have been something that factored in your journey? Because I feel like an awful lot of people go through imposter syndrome. They're bad talking themselves, even though they're successful, they're, a manager or president of whatever, and they're still saying, well, blah, 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 I suck at this or that. And I used to be like that, and oh, that drives me nuts. So I'll let you speak to that.
Absolutely. So imposter syndrome is huge. It is huge. And it does tie very closely to burnout because what I found is the way, the women in my practice that I've worked with, the ones that are trying to keep their boss happy, keep their husband happy, the ones that have high standards that are trying to be perfect, the root of that, I mean, is basically it's based in fear, like a fear of loss or a fear of not belonging or a fear of not enough. But tied in with that fear is that self-talk that you're talking about, that criticism, that self-criticism. And that self-criticism drives and pushes a lot of the behavior that can end in burnout, right? So, yeah, so shifting that inner talk, that story from I am not enough, which is basically what it all is I'm not enough. It doesn't matter what I do, I'm still not enough, to I am enough, I am worthy, is a huge, it's a huge mental shift, and it takes practice. It takes practice to pull it off. But it absolutely can be done. And it's critical to be able to find that inner peace that we need to be able to enjoy the success that we have.
So, what does it feel like to get to that point of I have at least some inner peace? Like, I've actually made some headway on some of the issues that I'm having with burnout.
It feels amazing. So yeah, so you go from you go from feeling like you have to show up all of the time and be on all of the time to prove that you're worthy, to make sure that you don't get laid off, to make sure that you don't miss the promotion for whatever reason that you're pushing yourself, right? You shift from that to being like, I can put out this much effort and it is enough. I will be okay. My family will be okay. My finances will be okay. Everything is okay. And it's a shift from like this fear, this fear-based activity, this fear of loss, fear of rejection, all these fears that are driving that, like you're saying, that negative self-talk. It's like critter brain in our head, just like trying to keep things uh safe for us, right? And shifting into a place where you're okay, and you will be okay, and you are willing to allow support into your life, that you don't have to prove that you're worthy because you are, and you can allow others to help you. And that's a big part of the transition, is beginning to outsource, delegate, and let go of things that we don't have to control.
And delegation, I know just as a person who really works very, very hard and is very resourceful and independent, it's hard for me to delegate and let go of some things. And even myself, I feel like I have to be in control. Does that element play a role as far as just I'm in control? So I'm not going to delegate. I'm not going to let people know what I'm going through because if I do, I lose control.
Yes, that's a big deal. So the control is your desire to, keep yourself safe, right? For whatever's driving you there. And when you realize that, and I went through that transition myself, like where I was like, I'm Superwoman, I'm known as the one that gets it done, I can do the work of five people, and that's why I'm valuable, right? That's what I thought. And at some point, I fortunately had a boss who's like, you need to learn how to delegate because we need to duplicate you. And I was just like, oh. But it was a shift. I was like, okay, I'm going to intentionally give other people the tasks that are on my plate, and I'm going to coach them and help them if they need it, and watch them grow into it. Right. So it was practice, but I had to let go. I had to let go of thinking that I had to be the one to do it all. I also had to let go, not necessarily of my standards, but like let go of the idea that they should do it the way that I would, or necessarily like as good as I could. And what I realized by doing that is you find people, not everyone, but you do find people who are better than you. And then when those people are supporting you, those people are part of your team, that's when massive amounts of growth and acceleration in your business and your career can happen, is when you start to delegate and empower others and they grow into it and they surpass you. That is amazing. So essentially what you need to do is shift from I am super person, I'm Superman, Superwoman, I can do it all myself, to I am a leader. I need to shift into a leadership role, which means I don't do it all. I set the vision and I delegate and I coach and I empower others to support the vision.
Do you find that a lot of your clients are like very competitive? Is that like a trend that you see?
I haven't seen so much competitive. It's more they're competing against almost like a shadow self, like the person that they're afraid of being. Like I said, like that imposter syndrome. So they're driven by this relentless self-criticism or fear. Not necessarily that they're trying to keep up with somebody else. It's just that they have this idea that if they don't perform whatever it is, like certain level of work, showing up a certain amount of hours, if they're not visible in all the meetings, that they're going to lose their job or that they won't be recognized or they're going to miss the promotion. It's not so much like they're trying to compete directly with other people. At least I haven't seen that in my clients.
It's interesting. Some of the things that you're talking about, I almost feel like these are things that I have put myself through as far as like, boy, if I don't work a certain amount of hours or if I don't do like a certain amount of work or whatever, like I'm not succeeding. And one thing that I've tried to do on my own, and one of the reasons I really was excited to have you on the show is the fact that although I think I've gotten better, there's probably still a lot to learn and a lot to do in that regard. And it's like how do you kind of, I mean, you provide a service that's very valuable and you're very supportive and you're there. But when it comes down to it, you, the person, the individual, has to do the work. And I'd be curious to know what they have to do mentally to kind of like start letting some of that stuff go.
So the surprising, like I think of it as like the secret key or the surprising step that needs to be taken is authenticity. And you'll be like, what does authenticity have to do with burning out? Um, and it's key because when you understand what your true values are and and you start living in alignment with your core values, then you know what to say yes to. And so when you can say yes to what truly matters to you, not what, that person over there is doing, not what your mom thought you should be doing, not what your, coworker over there is doing. But when you understand what is valuable to you, what actually matters to you in this season of life, and you say yes to that, it becomes very easy to say no to the noise and to say no to things that are not going to move the needle in what actually matters to you. And so when we step into authenticity, we're aligning with our values, and that reduces the internal conflict that can contribute to burnout. It reduces emotional exhaustion because it involves being true to yourself and expressing your thoughts, feelings, and needs honestly. And that openness can reduce emotional exhaustion by fostering, genuine connections with people. And it enhances self-awareness. And then you have a better understanding of your strengths, limitations, and boundaries. And then you can set realistic expectations and create boundaries that support you. Um, so yeah, so it stepping into authenticity and into your own value system and being strong in that space for yourself is really like the pivotal, the 80, the 20% of effort that'll get you 80% of the results in ending burnout.
It's interesting that you said the word authenticity because I view myself, even factoring in some of the things that I'm opening up about on my end, I feel like I'm about as authentic as they come. But
Mhm.
when I view it through your perspective, it's like, you know something? I don't think that was always necessarily true. And maybe just in general in life, that might have been true. But my approach to some things may not have been authentic because, again, I guess it comes back to I have to please the company. I please the boss. I have to please my parents, whatever it is. I have to. It's almost like a little bit of a role that you're
Mhm.
playing rather than just empowering yourself and saying, no, I don't want to do this. No, I have to delegate to somebody else. no, I need time for myself. Instead of just saying, well, I gotta say yes because I have goals that I need to accomplish. And it's something that I feel this is why one of the reasons I love doing this show because it gives me some self reflection, hopefully others. But I mean, I love just kicking stuff like this around in my own head. But it's amazing just the way you put that. Like, wow, for as authentic as I think I am, that's not necessarily always the case. So that's an amazing perspective, I think. And one thing before we get too far and run out of time, maybe you can, because I love these three words that I kind of latched onto to introduce you. I know you've talked a lot about nourishment, you've talked a bit about boundaries, and you've talked about a little bit indirectly about alignment. I mean, are these three words, are they like pillars to you? How did you come up with those three words, those three topics as like the backbone of what you're doing?
So yes, so the method that I use with my clients is I call it the peace method. And so the first step is pursuing your yes. And that's where you're stepping into authenticity and you're getting clarity on what matters to you and you ditch the shoulds. And so that speaks to that authenticity piece of the puzzle there. The second step is energizing your being. And this is where we eat for energy, improve our sleep, connect with loved ones, make sure we are having joyful movement in our life, reset our nervous system, and release trauma. And that's that nourishment piece. The third step is asserting our voice, and that is learning how to ask for what you want and get it, learning the 5 ways to say no and gaining confidence and holding your space, and addressing sabotage. So that is that boundaries that you just mentioned. And then the C is claiming your surplus. So if you do, those three things, you're going to have more energy and you're going to have more time. And so we want to claim that surplus time and energy and focusing it onto what you really want to do in your life, onto whatever the next step is, whatever the vision is in your life. And then that's the last one, is elevate your success and just making sure that you springboard into the right direction that's in authentic alignment with, your true dreams. So yes.
So at the end of somebody's time being coached by you, what do you hope will be like the end result, other than obviously having peace and maybe success in the workplace? What what's like the end result that you're hoping to see?
So it depends on the client. Everyone has like their own vision of what an ideal outcome will be, but some of them have been like, I want enough energy to get through the day. That's a result, so we double their energy, make sure they've got the energy to get through the day. Another one, when she first started the program, she said, I just want clarity on what the next step is because I'm so overwhelmed. I don't even know where I'm going. And so for her, it was like getting rid of the overwhelm, making sure she has space for herself, and then getting that clarity on her direction or path in life. And so you know, it's really about healing and recovering from that stress buildup that's been going on. It's about learning how to speak your truth, finding your voice, asking for what you want and get it. That's also a goal that I've had expressed by my clients, is they need to know how to say what they want because they just never do, and so it depends on the individual, but usually something in those pillars appeals to my clients and they're like, okay, that is where I want to be in the next like 90 days. And then it evolves as they go, like, oh, we've got to this point, now I want to shift over here. And so it just continues to evolve.
So your focus primarily is to work with women. Do
Mhm.
you see a difference between burnout with women, burnout with men?
Other than that, more women are reporting burnout. I don't know, because I do work just with women. but men burn out as well, and I think that they burn out for the same reasons. Like there's those internal factors, there's external factors. It's like there's so many things that can go into causing a burnout. But yeah, men absolutely burn out. I think that it may be just as frequent as women. I don't know, but I know that more women are reporting it. And I know there's like hypotheses or theories. Well, maybe it's because women are burning out at a higher rate because oftentimes, as a woman, you end up with the second shift. So if you have children or parents to take care of, it tends to fall on the woman, not always. Or if there's a household to manage, it tends to fall on the women. Um, I know there's been a lot of progress made culturally in this area, but I think that's still going on, and I think that that could influence that burning out, as well as the fact that women are paid less than men. Because one of the external factors that can contribute to burning out is unfair compensation. And so I think that that could also be one of those factors. And compensation is not just monetary; it's also recognition and acknowledgement. So,
So, if what I'm hearing in at least that particular part of what we're discussing, and I think I'm stumbling over some of my words here because I feel like I can relate a bit to some of the struggle because I personally, so I think some of it for me as to why I see some of these points and can relate to them the way that I do is because from basically from some of the points you're making, women are tasked with having to really prove themselves a little bit more because of just the way everything is structured. And as somebody who was born with a cleft palate and lip and have had some of the struggles that I've had, and still, whether it's happening internally or maybe I'm seeing it externally, I still feel like I have a lot to prove. And I think that's what drives me to
mhm,
work insanely as I do. And really, it kind of like motivated me to create this show and to do some of the things that I'm trying to do for myself because I've had a great life and I've done a lot of really good things, a lot of really cool things, but sometimes I feel like if I were a different person, didn't have some of the obstacles that I have, maybe my life would have been a little bit different and maybe so much I would have had more success or whatever. Just I think my mentality would have been different just as far as like feeling that itch to like I gotta prove myself. They don't see me a certain way. That person doesn't, that company didn't. And
mhm,
I'm hearing your story and hearing what you're talking about, I'm like, boy, obviously I'm not a woman, so I can't really claim to see that perspective, but I feel like I can at least kind of see a perspective and that will, that drive, like I have to prove myself.
mhm. And you're absolutely right. Like I know men who have burnt out, and a lot of it is rooted in the I need to prove myself, wherever that came from in their life, like whatever that programming was. So I know it's out there. I just don't directly work with men who are burning out. And I think it's incredibly valid and definitely needs to be spoken to, um, so that men realize that they can reach out and they can get support and they can shift it. They don't have to burn out. They are worthy because they are. I think that we're all humans and that the process for healing is basically the same. Like, claim your yes, energize your being, assert your voice. All those steps, matter whether you're male or female, regardless of how we got this idea in our head that we're not worthy or that we have to prove ourselves. It's there, like,
And you said one very important word as well that I think factors into all of our mentality, and that's programming.
mhm,
Programming is very important, whether it's your parents, your, you know, your friends, your colleagues, your enemies, whatever it may be. And at this point, I believe we're getting close to wrapping up. So if you want to tell everybody how they can find you, how they can work with you, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. So yeah, so if you've resonated with any part of our conversation today, whether you see yourself as the people pleaser or a perfectionist or an overachiever, and you're tired of contorting yourself just to find balance, then I've got something for you. And it's a cheat sheet designed to help you reclaim your time and energy, allowing you to cut your hours by 20% or more. And it's 7 principles. And even if you just pick one or two, you'll see a noticeable shift in your life. You'll find more time, more energy while still maintaining your top performer status. And the principles are simple, but implementing them may not be easy. And that's why I also offer the opportunity to book a spot on my calendar, and we can troubleshoot and figure out what is keeping you from the serene success that you're looking for, what's keeping you from ending the burnout. And you can find that cheat sheet at serenesuccess.net/pod.
All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing your perspective and lots of great wisdom shared here today, and certainly giving me something to think about both on the fly and after I hit the stop button for sure. And just I knew when we made contact that this was going to be not only good for everybody in the audience, I knew it would be good for me to get this perspective. So I thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to hang out and chat.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been such an honor.
No problem. Well, everybody, this was Hannah Tackett. She is a career coach, also deals very importantly with mental health and burnout. And she is of Serene Success. And I am Marc Schmidt of Mark My Words. Thanks again to Hannah for joining us. And I thank you for listening. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Marc Schmidt or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.